Hello and welcome to Perfectly Paranormal, episode 106. My name's Annaschmidt, and I'm here every week to share with you true paranormal encounters and information about devils, demons, and dark energy beings that no one else talks about. And today you are in for a treat. We have Alexandra Blair with us. She is a well-known astrologist, and she's going to be sharing some of her most memorable paranormal experiences with you, including the kitchen caper, the trickster entities in her bedroom as a child, the dark attachment, and how she overcame her fear of dark paranormal beings. So let's get into our interview with Alexandra. Welcome, Alexandra. It's lovely to have you here today on Perfectly Paranormal.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'm really excited to be here, and it's a lovely day to talk paranormal.
It is indeed. I had an astrology session with Alexandra and I was absolutely blown away. And we got on to the topic of talking about the paranormal. And I thought this would be a perfect chance for Alexandra to share some of her background, who she is, what she does, and how the paranormal sort of ties into your life, how it appears in your life.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and I'm excited to tease it out. It's been a lifelong journey, just as I'm sure it's been for you and your listeners.
So what would you like to share with us? What would be your first experience that you had that was the most memorable one that is sort of stuck in your mind to this day?
Yeah, I think, I grew up in a very open and spiritual house. My dad was very agnostic, and my mom was a sort of witchy spiritual creature. And so they really encouraged all of my exploration. I've always been into spooky stuff, not scary stuff, but spooky stuff. There's such a fine line. So they encouraged me. I mean, I had like crystals and they let us play with spirit boards and stuff, just playing around. And yeah, it just was all of that was so normal and accessible to me. And I think my most foundational and sort of like a fond memory that I have looking back when I was really young, my sister and I would go sleep on the weekends at my grandma's house. And every weekend, we would wake up later than my grandma. She always woke up at like 5 a.m. And she was such an awesome lady. She let us drink black coffee and play poker with her till like 2 a.m. And then she'd be waking up at 5 to make us breakfast. And so we could tell if she was awake because we could hear like the dishes or in her kitchen and, her cooking for us. And there were so many occasions when my sister and I would hear her making stuff in the kitchen and we would sneak down to kind of go surprise her and find an empty kitchen. Like that happened so often that we for sure heard that stuff happening and then creeped out. And it never felt, dark or dangerous or anything. It was always just like, whoa, what is that? What is that all about? And that is one of my earliest and fondest memories of my sister and I both experiencing that together.
Wow. So you work as an astrologist. So do you find that the paranormal ties into your work, or is it a component of your understanding of how the world works?
Certainly both of those things. So definitely a huge part of my work is client work. And so I meet often with clients who have a wide range of experiences with the paranormal, just like you do, and wide range of spiritual practices and experiences working with, deities, beings, ancestors, spirits of all kinds. It's really fascinating to hear people's stories and to map it onto astrology. I love doing that and talking about that. And it's certainly a part of my work. I'm a polytheist, so I work with a number of different deities, and I work with Apollo in the context of my astrology work because Apollo has a special connection with astrology and with divination. And I really think of astrology as a form of divination. We talked about that in our session, and you talked about your pendulum, which I'm still searching for my perfect one, but trust, I have not forgotten the conversation we had. I can't wait. I'll know it when I feel it, just like you have with yours. But yeah, I feel like the paranormal is really tied up in what I do, and it doesn't have to be. I certainly have clients who I meet with who are atheists or who are Catholics, but it feels inextricably tied up in it for me.
Yeah, it does indeed. And people are quite often skeptical about the paranormal world around us. They don't believe in it unless they can see it, feel it, touch it. Well, it just doesn't work that way because it's energy. It's absolute energy. Do you find that when you go places, because you are what I would call an energy worker, you work with astrology, you work with the planet, you're working with universal energy, do you ever find that you go into places or that you have energy beings following you home or that you're aware of them in places?
Yes, very much so. And in many different ways throughout my life. In the context you're asking about my work, I do. There has only been maybe once or twice, but once or twice I've hung up a session and had a headache, and I'm like, that's not right. There's something going on here, or I feel totally drained. Like we signed on and I had a client session earlier, and Anna asked, "Oh, are you just exhausted?" I'm like, "No, I love my clients. I love talking to people. It truly makes me so excited." And I always hang up my call feeling like I've had a mutual exchange of energy and I feel really excited and conversational and happy. Maybe once or twice I've gotten off a call and I felt like there was something siphoning, there was something sucking, there was something not right about that interaction. So, in the context of my work, it's pretty rare, but certainly in the context of my paranormal experiences in life, I feel like that happens pretty often.
Because these beings observe us. What I find quite often,
Hmm.
if I'm talking to a client on the phone or on Zoom or even through an email, is that I'll have that sort of conversation with the person, and either while we're talking or afterwards, the energy of the room will change. Because I always say to people, observe without fear, because then you're not creating emotions, you're not getting
Right.
distracted by that energy, because you want to observe the energy. So you observe without fear. And I'm like, okay, there's someone here. And I find that the dark, and especially the demonic beings, they will observe us all the time, no matter where you are and what you're doing. So I find that they make me feel quite heavy and make me feel quite sort of a little bit confused or a bit distracted or a bit brain foggy. And if I just say to them, I'm being professionally employed to clear this home, then they go, well, nothing we can do about her. She's not coming in randomly, just doing it out of ego or out of spite or just interfering. They understand the rules. I find them really, really fascinating.
So
Oh,
interesting, Anna.
it is. It is. So if you find that you're a bit drained or you feel like there's something maybe in your home or you feel like you've got someone looking over your shoulder going, oh, she's interesting, we might hang around here for a while. What do you do to get them to leave? Do you have a statement, or what is your sort of process you might use if you want to share? You don't have to share if you don't
Sure.
want to.
No, I'm totally happy to share. I have a friend who, I was really struggling with that a couple of years ago, and I reached out to a friend and we were talking about something totally unrelated. And she said, "Oh, I don't mess around with psychopomp or like engaging with spirit. I just tell them, this is my house. Go find somebody else to mess." And she was so conversational and so top of the head that it just reminded me, and it just brought me into this place of like, okay, we here on this place, we have the power, right? And
Yep.
there are rules and there are terms. And it doesn't have to be some big fancy thing. It has to be the thing that conjures the feeling in my body of empowerment and of, conviction. And so I've had a lot of different little routines, but I really just do whatever feels like I can authentically summon up some courage with no fear and not feel corny and not feel too ceremonial. I have a sacred salt that I have cultivated. Every powerful witchy woman I have in my life who's ever sent me flowers and all my ancestors, like I put this all in this salt. And so I always have some. I walk around my house, I salt, I sweep, I burn rosemary, and I just say, you're not welcome. Like it's really actually that simple. And that was such a revelation for me after so much fear in my life for so long around the paranormal. I was like, oh, I have power. That's right. I can just say, get out.
Yeah, that's how it works. I say to people that it's so, so simple that these dark beings that Hollywood has made out to be evil, malevolent entities that are going to throw you across the room and scratch you and all the rest of it. Most of the time they're not. There are rebels. There are always rebel factions, even in the dark realm, that will misbehave and not follow the rules. But generally,
Yeah.
it's really simple. Like I'll get my pendulum out and I'll go, oh my God, is this me? Am I wonky because I'm dehydrated or am I hungry? I always do the debunking. I'm like, no, it's none of those things. And it'll still be here. They sort of hang around on my right side, like they're looking over my shoulder and they're really close. And I'll just say with my pendulum, okay, so do we have any dark beings here? And I usually get no. I usually get the high level.
Yeah, they're not going to out themselves.
No, it's always the high ranking demonic beings because they hang around us energy workers because we
Yeah.
shine sort of a different way. And I'm not frightened of them. I work with them all the time. It's just like dealing with a tricky workmate. You just got to know how to, I don't want to say know how to handle them or how to manage the situation, really.
Yeah.
So it's really simple. Like you said, it's empowerment and it's intention. And I just say, look, I know you're here. I'm going to be clearing this house at such and such address for this person's name. And you're not going to be hurt or harmed. You just need to move house. Go down the road, go next door, go wherever it suits you, because they're simply going to leave and go to the next place that has the vibration they're after. And once they realise I'm not a threat, because God love them, they see us human beings as a threat sometimes. Who knows why? You've got these big, powerful beings that they're really quite insecure. And I might get a slap later for saying that. Wouldn't that be funny? I will do a post-edit if I do get a slap. I don't think that's being inappropriate. They're really insecure and they think that we're going to hurt or harm them or we're going to threaten them in some way. And I'm like, no, I've been employed to do this work. I treat you with respect. Please treat me with respect. And once they get that, they're like, poof, they're gone. And the room goes back to normal. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness, now my brain is going to function better. Because even though since I've had all this magic attack over the last 3 years, I've got like 5 layers of protection around me, I can still feel their presence. I really, really can. So what age, going back to childhood, because I'm always interested in people who are very aware of the paranormal. How did you sense the paranormal around yourself as a child? Did you see, hear, feel, know? What was your prime sort of sense? They call them the psychic senses. What was your prime sense, did you think, helped you to identify that it was something not rational?
Yeah. When I was young, I really struggled. I had really bad sleep paralysis. And that's kind of like that was like the initiation and it was the beginning and the end for quite some time because it was terrifying. I mean, I don't know if anyone has ever struggled with sleep paralysis. Essentially, your body is still asleep, but your mind and your eyeballs are awake. So your body is totally frozen. And I was kind of a scared kid anyway of scary media. I didn't consume that stuff because I knew it was scary and I just didn't like to think about it. So I would be laying there and I would see people, spirits, visions, people talking to me, people outside my window, people inside my room, people trying to speak with me. And it was like, my parents were, again, pretty supportive and validating. Like some of my spirits had names that they knew that I would see them. And it was such a intense series of experiences. I would say maybe from as little as I can remember up until maybe age 13 is when I started saying, I'm done with this. I'm turning this off inside my body. And that was that way for maybe, 15 years. I just was like, I don't want this anymore. It really came to kind of a head when my sister and I started experiencing, I wouldn't say that it was a fully malevolent spirit. It was certainly a trickster spirit. And it wanted us to sleep in certain arrangements in the rooms. My sister and I were always switching rooms and switching beds and painting the rooms and moving around. And it was like whenever my sister would sleep in the room that we later, became my room, she would wake up with scratches. Like, again, not very, very serious, not bleeding or anything like that, but very unexplained and very obvious scratches. And then when I would come back into the room, all this weird stuff would happen. Like for a couple weeks, I kept waking up with like pink stuff in my hair. We couldn't ever find what it was, but I would take a shower and just pink would run down. So it was like this weird trickery that was happening in our house, and everyone knew it. And again, was very like, we would talk about it and make jokes about it, and we would just switch the rooms again. But those kinds of experiences growing up, I think just really set a foundation. And even I spent a long time as like an atheist, but I always thought it was so funny when you're in a social situation and someone says, have you ever seen a ghost? It's so funny. It's like, if you ask me that question lovingly, I'm just like, oh, haha. And it reveals that the paradigms are so different because of the wealth of experiences that I feel like I've had in my life. I'm like, we don't have time.
No, it is quite funny, isn't it? People just,
Yeah.
they're so interested, but when you start talking about it, it's almost they just turn off instantly.
Yeah.
I find that happens a lot, is that people want to know. Like, I can give a kind of example. I know people that love paranormal movies, but when I make it real, they're like, oh, no, no,
Right.
no, we can't talk about that. No, 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 it's not real. I'm going, but yeah, it is real. It's part of the environment. Now, I wrote something down that I wanted to ask you. Do
Yeah.
you think you knew that when you were young, you were going to be doing some sort of energy work as you got older? Do you think it was part of who you are, what you were born with? Do you think that being an astrologist, was that your first point of call as your introduction to working with the energy world? Or did you, like me, I went through doing palmistry, numerology, card reading, and then I found pendulums, and then I found the house healing, which I'd already kind of been doing, but not on a professional level. So what was your first point of
Yeah.
call or entry into that energy work?
When I was younger, I was so unprepared, and even though my parents were supportive, they really did not have the foundation to help me understand the experiences I was having at all. And I turned that off. I said, I'm an atheist for 15 years and just like shut it down and was like, I'm not going to believe in anything and I'm not going to indulge anything. Period. Of course, during that time, like to me, being an atheist doesn't mean you don't believe in ghosts or paranormal or beings or entities. I believed in all of those things and always have because of my experiences, but it just,
Yep.
I rationalized it in different ways. I was actually drawn to the energy work of acting. Like I really thought I wanted to be an actor and that I wanted to wear different energies all the time and mold and morph. I found that to be so, I think that's a form of energy work if you're doing it right. But no, it wasn't until I was a little older, maybe like 27 or 28, and I started coming back to this kind of paranormal experiences, working with energies, beings, deities. And that's when I started getting into astrology as well. And it was a long process, Anna, of it's kind of a long story that I can tell or gloss over. Of I actually experienced a dark attachment, and that is what basically made me wake up and realize that I needed to face my fear and get over it, frankly.
You would be surprised how many people have dark attachments that don't want to acknowledge it. I've worked on clients that have been totally, totally skeptical, but they've done the medical route, they've done the mental health route, and they just don't fully solve the problem. And I also add now dealing with the magic side of things, since I got initiated into having to deal with that as a victim and creating processes, is that now I'm getting clients. They've done the medical, done the mental health, they're totally skeptical, and they're like, no, this won't work. But I will try anything to get rid of the thoughts and banging my head
Yeah.
on the bathroom floor and creating bloodshed, and they don't know what they're doing, and they're almost suicidal, and they can't work out why, because the doctors give them the ticks of approval. And I'm not doubting the medical system, it's just that they're just not tuned into the energy side of
Right.
things, how we can be influenced. So I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, we are integrally born with these skills, because I'm like you, I was aware of it early age, slept with my light on till I was like 15. When I went to bed,
Yeah,
trying to turn it
exactly.
off, I turn it back on again in my sleep,
Yeah.
because we just didn't know what it was, and we didn't know who we are and why we're experiencing these things. But we talked about a little bit earlier before we got on to recording this, is that sometimes these things happen to teach us about a process or a way that our
Absolutely.
life is heading.
Yeah, so with the dark attachment, it was really interesting because in my mom's house, she had moved into this house and it kind of had a weird energy when she moved in, but my stepdad is Native American and we have a lot of indigenous and Native American like healers in our lives. And so we had people come in and work on the energy and everyone thought, "Oh, it's feeling all right." But I stayed with her for a few months and during that time, I stayed, and I always stay in a specific bedroom. And I just started to feel this really, really dark, like actually sinister. It started out a little teasing. I'm sure this is a story you hear all the time, but the more fear I felt, the more sinister it felt. And that's when I realized that something was going on because it was to the point where I was like washing my face and I could feel something behind me. I was waking up in the middle of the night hearing laughter, like in feeling watched, and I could see it. It was like a pit of darkness. It was a spot of darkness in the room that was darker than the rest of the room all the time, often like pressed up in a corner, weirdly enough. And I just thought I need to get out of this house. 'Cause nobody else really, I didn't talk to anyone else about it. I didn't think about it. So I moved to a new apartment, but it followed me. And it was so intense and interesting because, again, I was like washing my face with my eyes open, couldn't, I was so scared and I was living alone. I ended up reaching out to someone through the internet who did like an angel healing. They called Angel Michael, actually, which that was so interesting to experience that energy. That was beautiful energy. That healing did not fix my problem, but it was really beautiful. And I think about it all the time.
Yep.
I ended up having to work with another person who did like sacred geometry type healing. And that kind of worked. But in hindsight, to your point, pretty much all of that experience was an initiation into facing my fear. And it felt very related to Odin, which is a deity that I work with who's very into spooking people. So I probably should have known that that was coming for me. But it was so, it was took me on a 2 or 3 year long journey of facing my fear. And what I realized, Anna, is that the apartment I was living in, talk about the gauntlet of fear, had previously been a hospice facility run by nuns. And the place where I parked my car every day was the morgue of the old building. And the place where my apartment was the old Last Rites chapel. And it was just like I went from being so scared that I shut everything off to being so immersed in spirit beings in my bedroom, in my house all the time. I could see little footsteps under the door, like shadow footsteps. I could feel people in my house all the time. It was so crazy. And I didn't know this at the time. I had bought these candles that I just thought were beautiful, that were Santa Muerte candles. Like, so I was lighting these beacons at the same time as I was like salting everywhere every night and being like, hey, it's so sweet that you're here. You just go down the hall, like just somewhere else. And meanwhile, I was lighting these beacons every night saying, hey, come visit me. It was so intense.
It's a confusing message, and we as humans don't understand how this works until we live it and we work out how it works, and then
Yeah.
we work out how to not get stuck in it. So the building that you were in was so full of emotional, what I call emotional imprints, the emotions that people would have created, the sadness, the
Yeah.
sorrow, the abandonment, the guilt, just the missing people, and the trauma imprints of the death and the blood, because bloodshed creates a really big vibration that I found out quite recently. So when I clear homes, I look for trauma imprints and emotional imprints, because they're the two key things that the darker beings are
Yeah.
interested in. That's their food. It's what they feed off. So you take their food
Totally.
away, yeah, remove their food, and they're like, I'm going to have to go somewhere else now. And like, bye-bye, off you go, down the road, next door, wherever. You just have to
Yeah.
leave this property that I'm working on. But that is the key. You've experienced it, so you know how it works.
Yeah, it was interesting because that dark attachment, I then went back and I asked everyone else who'd stayed in the room. So, like my
Yep,
sister, my ex-boyfriend, every single one of them was like, that was the darkest time of my life. I had no joy. I couldn't experience joy. Nothing made me happy. I
yep,
was feeling like I was a husk of myself. Every single one of them, but we just had never compared notes in that way. And it kind of hung around, right? So we cleansed me of the attachment, but there was something weird in that room still
yep.
until my mom replaced the fan. That was the last thing from the previous tenants. It was like a ceiling fan that was a child's ceiling fan.
Okay.
And that was when it went overnight from feeling, it felt the darkest before the cleansing. Then we had the cleansing and it felt just a little still spooky, but it was like that imprint that you're talking
Yep,
about. And
yep.
then when we removed that fan, it felt like we were going from a home to an Airbnb. It was just, there was no energy in the room at all. It was dead empty.
Yeah, nice, nice. And I love it when people can feel the difference. They can feel that change. And it helps them when they move into new flats or new apartments or new homes, or they go to people's places and they're like, I can't sit here. There's something really weird here. I'm going to go and sit there. And you compare the two locations, and it makes your life easier when you're aware of the energy world that is around us. I find it totally fascinating. And that's why I created this podcast, to help people understand how it works in a non-fear-based way, because really and truly, it is mildly frightening. I can't say it's not frightening at all, but once you understand it, you go, is that all? That's what people say to me all the time, those three words. Is that all? I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah. It's a really, really simple message when you understand homes and beings and how they work.
Absolutely. I mean, even because of that experience, I had met my partner around that time and he would come in for the weekend and we had a little series that we would do where we would just stand in the dark for as long as we could stomach it because we were both trying to work on fear. So I had like a closet. It had an interesting energy to it. So we'd go stand at the door of the closet and we'd look into the closet in the pitch dark and we
Yep.
just described to each other what we were seeing and feeling. Like I was like, "Are you feeling it like kind of pulsing? Are you seeing those like red sparkles?" We didn't know what we were doing. And we graduated to doing that outside and like going out into the woods at night and just it once you look that in the face, it's so dismantled of its power. And I have a lot of friends who are into spiritual stuff, and sometimes people will say, I feel something negative. And the beauty of having done all that work over so many years is that I can say for sure when something negative is there or not. And I can say, no, that's not negative, that's fear. But let's stand here for a minute and you can sit in it and we can experience it and talk through what is happening. And of course, then if there is something scary, I know for sure when it's happening and I get out of Dodge. But it's been such an empowering thing to do is to just look it right in the face. And I had sort of a culminating moment like in the past few months where I sat in the pure dark and I like did a little meditation and I just sat there in pitch dark in a place that I knew was kind of had energy to it. And I was like, wow, I've just come totally full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the time, these dark or demonic level beings, they're just
Yeah.
interested more in the really heavy negative emotions in places. They give us humans what we want to frighten us. They see the
Yeah.
movies we watch. They watch how we want to respond to their presence. So therefore, they will give it to us because we create the food they want.
Absolutely. Absolutely true. I wonder like what would you describe as, something I experienced in my apartment that I still kind of can't figure out is that I actually got it on film, on footage, a shadowy like figure, a being that was there. It felt neutral. I mean, it didn't feel negative or anything, but is there some kind of specific way that you would talk about an entity that in that state?
I just call them the observers. Now,
Mm,
I don't really talk about extraterrestrials very often. They like to be called cosmic beings because ET is a little bit disrespectful, so I was told to call them cosmic beings. They are amongst the plethora of spirits, elementals, dark and demonic beings. They are part of the energy that is present on Earth, within the Earth, around us, in all the places that we go and all the things that we do. We are being observed all the time. People talk about the Hat Man, and I think of him as an observer. They're like, he just stands at my door. He doesn't come in. I worked on a teenage girl's bedroom one day, and she'd wake up and she'd see this man in the door, and it wasn't her dad. She's like, he's just standing there. He's looking. I said, they're observing us. She said it just stood there. It wasn't malevolent. It didn't touch me. There was no scratching. There was no nightmares. There was no change in the energy of the room. It was simply observing. I think
mm,
we're an experiment. Earth is an experiment
yeah.
for all of the energy beings that are around us, even the angelic beings. They're observing us all the time. And one thing I've learned through this magic attack, people go, oh, love and light, the archangels will look after us. It's a whole heap of rubbish. They will not look after you unless you ask them to help. It's what I learned through my experiences is that if I can craft a protection statement or just something to help, like a process, and then I ask Archangel Michael to activate it, because I can't activate it. I don't have that higher vibrational power
Yeah.
to fight against something that is attacking me, that is being sent by other humans who are using other vibrational beings. So I work with Archangel Michael all the time. So it's knowing how it all works. And the dark beings are always watching us because they know that this person who's living in sadness and torment and fear is just going to continuously create those emotions that they'll hang around to feed off. And I'll always say to people, the work I do when I do energy clearings for them, whether it be a home or whether it's specifically personal clearings, I can clear the baggage that you've created. But you need to see your doctor and your mental health worker to work
Yeah.
on the memories, to work on the feelings that you have around a situation. And once you come to terms with it, the beings go, oh, well, she's not going to create sadness and fear and whatever. I'm going to go down the road to Joe Bloggs. He's doing all that. So they just move around in the environment. So these people or these beings that you were seeing or feeling or hearing, they can be all different levels of entities. You'll find this interesting. This happened to me in the last week. I'm not going to share names because they haven't given me permission. But I've been working with defending against voodoo and hoodoo and sorcery and magic from an outsider's perspective. I know nothing about any of the practices, nothing at all, other than what I've recently watched on YouTube or read online. I'm going to sleep one night, and sometimes when I shut my eyes, inside my eyelids, I will see people's faces, like I'll get a flash. Now I'm going to sleep one night, and I see this lady's face, and she sort of looks up at me, gives me a smile, disappears. And then I see this skeleton man. Now, it wasn't frightening. It was showing itself to me as a way of helping me with a problem I've got at the moment that I'm working on for someone else. And I'm like, wow. They find ways to present themselves, because I've been so bamboozled with all this magic and stuff that's been going on that this being may not have been able to get through until I was in that very moment of had my eyes shut, ready to go to sleep. I saw the flash of the image and I wasn't frightened because I observe without fear. And I went, okay, here I am getting online on the internet, trying to work out, who is this being? And I went, oh, now that's really interesting. So these entities watch us. These are all different types of beings: cosmic, magic, sorcery, voodoo, hoodoo, angelic beings, elementals. They're around us all the time and they're just watching, waiting for that moment sometimes just to step in and give us a hand.
Absolutely. I've definitely found that to be true. I think your point about being constantly observed is so important for, I live in America, which is sort of has like a Christian paradigm. And so people kind of come from one of two backgrounds. They either expect that gods, beings, entities, deities are paying attention to everything they do and can read their thoughts, which is just not accurate. Or they kind of like have rejected that and they, I have a lot of polytheist friends who don't even pray. And I'm like, okay, well, there's got to be a middle ground. Like you can pray
Yep.
to a being or call it in or, do, some fabulous, amazing ritual like you have, craft an incredible statement and bring them in on it. But you have to ask. And
Yes.
then there's like a
Yes.
weird judgment and sort of like a guilt that people have about asking too, which needs to be dismantled. But if you ask, I have found that they're so responsive. Like a friend and I, when I found out I was pregnant with my son, my grandma appeared to me in that state. I had just woken up, but I was still had my eyes closed, and it was her face so clear, and she showed me a star, a Venus, and I was
Oh,
like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. I mean, I just immediately knew. Yeah, it was really sweet. And I thought, oh, Venus means it's a girl. Lo and behold, 10 months later, I find out it's because my son is a Libra rising ruled by Venus and Venus in the first house, which means that Venus is very astrologically important to him. So it was beautiful foreshadowing from her. But so my friend and we tried to do a spirit board over Samhain holiday, and we called in my grandma. And it was just so interesting because it was such a reminder. I had been sitting here for months going, I wish I could talk to my grandma. Like, I miss my grandma. I love her. I would love to experience something. I wish she'll visit me in a dream. And I'm like, literally, all I have to do is ask her to come. All I have to do is summon her here to ask her to come talk to me. And she was
yes, you
there.
do. It is so,
Yeah.
so simple.
Yeah.
You don't have to
It
do
was really
fancy
sweet.
meditations. Yeah, I say to people, if you don't want to sit and meditate for an hour, don't. Shut your eyes or look at their photo. If you really miss someone, look at their
Yeah.
photo
Yeah.
and just tune into something that they did with you, maybe a hug or cooked you your favorite meal or a conversation. They're there all the time. All the dimensions all
Totally.
overlap all at the same time. It kind of blows
Yeah,
my
that's so
brain.
sweet.
But
She loved molasses cookies. I'll cook her molasses. I'll bake her some molasses cookies. I will say, I'm sure your listeners know, like the spirit board, we did not just do that willy-nilly. We took many a precaution and we spoke with Eric from the Spirit World Center and he gave us like some very ironclad rules.
yeah,
So we took our precautions.
yeah, definitely. I've had some interesting experiences when I made my own Ouija board. I thought I'd be quite crafty and had let something very nasty into my house many years ago. This was in the
Oh
early
no.
days. So I tend to avoid any of the boards or anything other than using a pendulum. That tends to be my thing.
Yeah.
But I don't judge other people for using them. I just know that because
Yeah.
I'm such a paranormal addict, just that I just seem to attract these beings, the darker beings, because that's where my fascination and my focus is. They hang around.
Yeah,
Yes,
they're interested in you.
they
They're like,
are, and
what's
I'm
going on over
interested
here
in
with
them.
this one?
So, would you like to tell the listeners about your business offerings and how they can contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. I am reachable at Nine Lives Astrology on Instagram. It's the number nine lives astrology. And I have a website, ninelivesastrology.com as well. And you can reach me there. I do all kinds of astrology readings. I talk with a lot of spiritual practitioners, help them learn about their lives and the cycles, these energetic cycles, like you talked about, coming around to from atheism to astrology, for example, like that's a very clear cycle we can map out. And I can totally see when people are dealing with spiritual stuff or stuff outside their control. It's really, really fun to look at astrology. So definitely people can check that out on my website. And I post some interesting informational content on my Instagram.
It's been wonderful. It's been so wonderful having you here today with us, Alexandra. Thank you so much for being here on Perfectly Paranormal.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Anna.
So, in episode 107, you will learn some very handy grounding tactics to ward off entities looking for ungrounded individuals to shack up with. We will briefly unpack what grounding is and why it is so important before we get into some of the signs and symptoms of being ungrounded, what disrupts your grounding, and easy practices that you can do every day to stay grounded. So stay tuned for a fundamentally groundbreaking episode on keeping your energy rooted into the earth. So thank you for joining me today. And don't forget, if you want to share a paranormal experience just with myself, or you would like me to share one of your experiences through my podcast, you can do a voice recording, or you can write out your experience and I will read it exactly as you have written. You can email me at spiritualbeing44@gmail.com. And for information on paranormal house clearing, you can visit my website, Spiritual Being. You will find the address in the description box. And I look forward to sharing this spooky space again with you next week. And remember, life is perfectly paranormal.